Many people have very fond memories of holidays or family gatherings or summer days spent with their grandparents. I, however, never knew my grandfather. That is to say, my only interaction with him was the handful of memories I have of him sitting in a recliner of his declining health, passing him as I moved about my grandmother's house with youthful exuberance, the only words being exchanged short answers to prodding questions about my life, my new toys, or my personal endeavors. All of these short interactions with my grandfather stunted my relationship with him considerably, as his poor health had caught up to him long before I was even old enough to have any interest in the many stories he had to share. Now, however, I cling to the memory of my grandfather and have gotten to know him quite well through story. Through these many stories about my grandfather, I've learned a lot about him. I've learned about his character, his personality, and most importantly, I've gotten to know him. My grandfather was a pilot. He flew Fu-4 Corsairs off of aircraft carriers for the Marine Corps in World War II and the Korean War. Now, during the time my grandfather was a pilot, leather skull caps were the fashionable headgear of the time. These, of course, did not provide much protection in the event of a crash, which my grandfather managed to do enough times that he wound up with dentures before his 30th birthday. This was the result of him telling the Marine Corps dentist to pull the rest of his teeth after he had lost some with each plane. One of my favorite stories, the story I'll be sharing with you of my grandfather, was told to me by my mother. Now, this story isn't one of some heroic feat or incredible tale of combat. This is a story of, if anything, human error. After my grandfather's fighter pilot days were behind him and he had earned his way up to the rank of major, he was in the position of training new pilots. Now keep in mind, this was still when they were using open cockpit biplanes for training these new flying aces. In addition to this, at this point in my grandfather's career, he was more comfortable in the air than he was on the ground, so who better to learn from? Well, on this particular day, my grandfather was tasked with teaching one of these new pilots in training how to perform a loop. Everything was going smoothly with the flight up until the plane reached the top of the loop. Being momentarily suspended upside down, the seatbelt that my grandfather neglected to buckle at the beginning of the flight was doing a whole lot of nothing, and he promptly fell out of the plane. This, of course, left the new pilot alone mid-flight as my grandfather parachuted to the ground. Now, before you think too hardly about it, yes, the new pilot landed safely, and yes, my grandfather survived. But that's not the reason I'm telling you this story. The reason I'm telling you this story is because through story you can learn a lot about not only my grandfather, but what he did and how much he dedicated to his country and his passion for flying. Through a story as simple as this, I'm able to connect more with my grandfather now than I ever did when I was a child running through my grandmother's house.